Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. The end is nigh. Here comes a new episode of Rock and Read. Today we'll read the last chapter of Janis, Her Life in Music. Before I began this remarkable book over a year ago, I already believed that Janis was the undisputed queen of rock and roll. As I leafed through the pages, my belief in that increased exponentially. Newly discovered details emerged regarding Janis's life that helped me understand who the real Janis was. At first glance, she seemed like an outgoing, rambunctious, headstrong maverick, but she also harbored a lonely, doubtful, and sensitive side. Practically two separate entities. Janis the performer versus Janis the person. I'm certain that Janis wanted love much more than fame. Too bad, so sad, she couldn't find it. Anyway, this chapter called Pearl, Janis's nickname, is longer than Taylor Swift's ex-boyfriend list. So, I went to work editing, cut out less significant stuff, and kept important info. As a result, I trimmed the total chapter length from 36 pages to 20, which means this video should take under an hour to record. Yay! Let's see what transpired during the last year of Janis's life. A quote from Janis at the top backs up what I said earlier. On stage, I make love to 25,000 people, then I go home alone. Here we go. With the disbanding of Cosmic Blues after the New York show, Janis took a 3-month leave from performing. Living in her new home with Gravenites, she started in 1970, still occasionally shooting smack, usually with friends Sunshine and Peggy Caserta. As long as I think you'll quit sometime, I can stand it. I'll stick around, Gravenites told her. But if I think it's going to be all the time forever, I can't do it. I'm gone. Janis focused on doing fantastic and expensive work on the house, she wrote the Joplins. It's turning into a palace, all fur and wood and stained glass and velvet couches and chase lounges and even a chandelier hanging in the middle of an eye full of redwoods. She also took piano lessons for the first time since her mother had taught her as a child. She had kept on retainer two Canadian members of the Cosmic Blues Band, bassist Brad Campbell and guitarist John Till, and Grossman began recruiting candidates to join them in a new band when she went back to work. Janis spent her birthday, January 19, 1970, amid her first extended break from the stage since joining Big Brother in June of 1966. She wrote her family that, "I managed to pass my gasp 27th birthday without really feeling it. Not doing much now, just enjoying the house. I'm 1 month into a supposedly 3-month-long vacation." Janis also pondered the vicissitudes of rock stardom. Such a funny game. When you're nobody and poor, you don't care. You can just drift, but when you get a little position and a little money, you start really hustling to get more. And then when you're numero uno, you've really got to break butt so nobody catches you. Catches you? 2 years ago, I didn't even want to be it. No, that's not true. Janis seemed at last to understand her complicated mix of needs and how easy it was to conflate career ambition and her yearning for love. But, understanding intellectually, didn't fill the hole, relieve her fundamental loneliness, or significantly alter the destructive behavior that caused many of her problems. Later that spring, she would tell a journalist, "I had the Cosmic Blues real bad. You've got to realize that you'll never have as much as you want, and that when you die, you'll be alone. Once you've really accepted this, then it doesn't hurt so much." She quoted a lyric from a new song she had begun singing, "Get it while you can, 'cause it may not be there tomorrow." These sentiments were in effect a reframing of Seth Joplin's Saturday Night Swindle lesson. Janis compulsively told herself that accepting this dark worldview relieved some of that pain. Her Cosmic Blues were compounded by the loss of another family member the previous year. Her beloved 2-year-old dog George had vanished from her Porsche while it was parked outside her rehearsal space. She placed ads, offered a reward, and announced he was missing on KSAN radio, all to no avail. Grossman gave her a fluffy white pooch, which she called the daughter of George. She wrote her parents that she wanted lots of dogs. That spring, Janis adopted 2 cats and 3 dogs, including a great Pyrenees, a cross between a St. Bernard and a Mastiff, she wrote home. She told them she had named her huge dog Thurber after humorist James Thurber, whose work her father had long admired. In May, she remarked to a reporter, "Dogs are better than people. They're my best friends." The unconditional love the animals offered, combined with her own uncomplicated needs, gave Janis a taste of family. In San Francisco on April 4th, Janis joined Big Brother at the Fillmore West for a reunion show orchestrated and recorded by Bill Graham. Before a euphoric crowd, they played 8 songs from their 2 albums together, starting with a chaotic combination of the 2. Though she had a cold, Janis sounded terrific, and she alternated songs with Nick Gravenites, who was now singing with the group. Her old band joined her on stripped-down versions of Janis's Cosmic Blues tracks Try, with Brad Campbell on bass, and Maybe. During a jazzy 20-minute version of Big Brother's All Is Loneliness, Janis improvised lines about the loneliness waiting for me at home. The highlight was a jam with Gravenites on another long blues improvisation she called Ego Rock, where she ripped her home state. "I had to get out of Texas, baby. Lord, it was bringing me down. I've been all around the world, but Port Arthur is the worst place I've ever found." Janis ended the first verse with the declaration, "I'm going to live to be an old lady and never go back to Texas." Playing with Big Brother for the first time in 15 months was so much fun, she said, drinking tequila, kissing, but she had come to accept, with no small measure of sadness, that she'd likely never have that again. "You can't go home again," she said, quoting Thomas Wolfe. Big Brother and their hometown fans knew the nostalgic enjoyment of the night could not be replicated. That it came off at all was testament to their deep bond. Nevertheless, the approximation of such a bond became Janis's goal as she hired new musicians to play alongside Campbell and Till. Grossman enlisted Canadian keyboardist Ken Pearson, who had been on an album with his client, Jesse Winchester, and 24-year-old Richard Bell had played the organ in the Hawks with Till. Bell and Pearson auditioned for Janis at her house, and their organ and piano styles fit perfectly in her sonic plan. Janis's former sax player, Snooky Flowers, recommended drummer Clark Pearson, a Minnesota native who played with him at a North Beach topless joint called The Galaxy. Janis began holding rehearsals in her garage, where they tried out new material. The 4 Canadians and 1 American felt naturally at ease amongst themselves. They were an organic unit rather than a forced aggregation of session players. Janis felt comfortable around them, and she and they treated each other with mutual respect. Though she was unquestionably the band leader, she could also be one of the boys again. In a bid to create an alternate persona to the rock star Janis, whose name she had heard screamed and seen printed, sometimes in disdainful, sexist articles, Janis cast about for a nickname, a sobriquet, to be used only by those who knew her best. Perhaps this persona would help her harness the more grounded version of herself. She seized on Pearl. Originally suggested by Dave Richards, this became her nickname, intended for use only by her new bandmates and close friends, those who knew the person, not the celebrity. "Don't use the word star," she told Dick Cavett after he referred to her as one. "It drives me up the wall." Janis had gotten lucky with her new down-to-earth bandmates. They were as enthusiastic as Janis about working together, and they quickly formed a close relationship. The easygoing personalities meshed well, and musically, they were pros, delivering a kind of soulful rock in which Janis could express herself more fully. Campbell and Till, as former members of the Cosmic Blues Band, offered guidance to the others, showing them the ropes. In an April letter to her parents, Janis sounded thrilled. "Really rushing through rehearsals, have a new 2 of the same guys, 3 new, smaller band, and it's really going fantastic. Great new songs, really needed new songs, so we'll do an album while on the next tour. Albert is lightening up on my schedule a little because of my old age and because I put my foot down. 2 months on the road and then 2 off, etc., so I can have a little personal life. I hope." Yet backsliding seemed inevitable. Janis said that heroin was the only way she could find peace when her feelings tormented her. To critic Nat Hintoff, she had described the effect of such emotion. I never seemed to be able to control my feelings, to keep them down. When you feel that much, you have super horrible downs. I'd do wrong things, run away, freak out, go crazy. Now, though, I've made feeling work for me, through music instead of destroying me. It's super fortunate. Man, if it hadn't been for the music, I probably would have done myself in. But after 3 years of playing, recording, and touring, music was no longer enough for Janis. She couldn't resist crawling back under that blanket of numbness offered by heroin. While tapering off methadone, Janis drank heavily. I'd get up intending to get out, Christofferson recounted, and in she comes with the early morning drinks, and pretty soon you're wasted enough and don't care about leaving. Music kept him there too. She learned his devastating Sunday morning coming down, a portrait of the disillusion he and Janis knew all too well. Christofferson greatly admired her version of Me and Bobby McGee, which she'd strum on her Gibson Hummingbird acoustic guitar and sing. I would always rather hear Janis sing Me and Bobby McGee, Christofferson said years later. The line, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose, he explained, expressed the double-edged sword that freedom is. You may be free, but it can be painful to be that free. Thanks to Bobby Newhart, Janis also scored a name for her band. Is everybody ready for a full tilt boogie? He yelled out one night. That's it, Janis said. The Full Tilt Boogie band members, along with Newhart and Christofferson, were among the revelers at Janis's Dionysian tattoo party in mid-May. Ever since getting a blue cornflower inked on her right foot by an English beau, Janis had wanted another tattoo. In San Francisco, she discovered Lyle Tuttle, a veteran tattoo artist who had inked a small red heart on her left breast. On her left wrist, Tuttle tattooed a bracelet resembling one she had bought in Bahia while traveling with Nyhouse. Janis was one of Tuttle's first female clients, and after she spread the word, women began flocking to him for tattoos. That put tattooing back on the map, Tuttle observed. With women getting a newfound freedom, they could get tattooed if they so desired. For 3 years, I tattooed almost nothing but women. On Dick Cavett's talk show, Janis raved about Tuttle, tattooed from the neck down, and gleefully described hiring him to tattoo her party guests, 18 of whom left with new embellishments. By mid-May, Janis had remained clean, and the band was ready for their debut gig, the first of 24 they would play over the next 3 months. Bennett Klotzer, Albert Grossman's new management partner, traveled to San Francisco to oversee Janis's progress. He was not keen on her choice of venue to premiere Full Tilt Boogie, a Hell's Angel party at a dance hall in San Rafael. That previous December, upon recommendation by the Grateful Dead, the Rolling Stones had hired the Angels as security for their free Altamont Festival, which organizers hoped to be kind of a Woodstock West. Bikers viciously beat up audience members and even knocked out Jefferson Airplane vocalist Marty Balin, who had tried to stop the violence. During the Stones set, an angel stabbed to death an 18-year-old black man, Meredith Hunter. The murder and much of the brutality had been caught on film for the documentary Give Me Shelter. Since then, the members of the Dead, who refused to perform at Altamont because of the assaults, had put distance between themselves and the bikers. Nevertheless, loyal to the end, Janis agreed to play for the Angels on a double bill with Big Brother. That night, as she approached the stage with a fifth of tequila in her hand, a biker from another motorcycle club demanded her bottle of booze. She shot back, "No way, man, I'm saving this for on stage." Before he could jump in to help, Brad Campbell witnessed Janis being attacked. The guy grabbed the bottle and just smacked her to the ground, he recalled. Then all hell broke loose. All these Hells Angels jumped on the guy and said, "Hey man, that's Janis Joplin." They beat the out of the guy. I thought, oh my god, these people are animals. Though bruised and dazed, Janis somehow managed to sing, but she downed so much tequila that she couldn't remember her performance the next day. Her bandmates told her that during the show, a Hells Angel forced drummer Clark Pearson to remove his shirt while playing. Standing behind him, the menacing biker started poking him on the shoulder. "You look hot. Take your shirt off," said Campbell. Pearson tried to ignore him and kept playing, but the angel demanded, "I said you look real hot. Take that shirt off." This time, Pearson did as told. Janis assumed a real leadership position among her bandmates while touring, offering musical direction in a diplomatic way, which they accepted. She always presented this very up, very happy, very ready to rock, ready to play, ready to do the job, make the music persona, recalled Full-Tilt guitarist John Till. It wasn't Janis and the Full-Tilt Boogie Band. She was a member of the band, and she liked it that way. Janis would tell a reporter that she hadn't enjoyed herself so much since the year she joined Big Brother. She was finally able to convey to experienced yet fresh players the subtleties and nuances of the music within her, and they could take her that direction and run confidently with it. With bookings through August 12th, Janis typically worked weekends, taking plenty of days off in between. The minute we went out on the road with Full Tilt Boogie, John Cook observed, Janis was a changed woman. She had figured out how to be the band leader. After 5 initial concerts in Florida and the Midwest, Dalton joined the tour on the way to a stop in Louisville, Kentucky. The tangible affection that flowed between Full Tilt and Janis showed itself in the playfulness they generated on stage, wrote Dalton, who would catch a half-dozen shows and grew close to Janis. "These guys are on the same wavelength as me," Janis explained. "It's more of a family thing again." She told a Louisville reporter of the band's really big talent, and "I'm so proud of them. I'm just so jacked to work with them every day. I just kiss them and tell them I love them." Full Tilt Boogie was a great band for her, according to Johanna Hall, who saw Janis perform with all 3 of her groups. They really loved her. The highlight of Janis' summer was from June 28th to July 4th on a train tour across Canada, named the Transcontinental Pop Festival, which kicked off in Toronto, stopped in Winnipeg, and ended in Calgary. From what John Cook called Woodstock on wheels, promoters leased a train, known as the Festival Express, to transport more than a dozen acts. Janis and Full Tilt were paid $75,000 to headline a bill that included the Grateful Dead, the band, New Riders of the Purple Stage, also known as NRPS, Chicago bluesman Buddy Guy, Canadian folk singers Ian and Sylvia Tyson in their new country rock band Great Speckled Bird, singer-songwriter Eric Anderson, and country soul band Delaney and Bonnie Bramlett, among others. In Toronto, Janis told Circus Magazine that she had never been so happy than with Full Tilt. "They rock and roll and butt shake when I do, and when I sing a ballad, they're quiet and sensitive. And they just love to play any hour of the day as long as I want. For those few hours on stage, I feel like I can do anything. I feel like the Empire State Building." Not long before, in Maryland, Janis' onstage acrobatics had landed her in the ER. She was rushed to the hospital by ambulance after she left the stage in extreme pain. During the last number, she had executed such an extended leg kick that she pulled a muscle deep in her groin. But by the time of the Festival Express, she had recovered fully, and during her Toronto performance, Circus's Roger Keane noted that she is pure energy, emoting, belting. You realize that Janis is probably the most exciting pop performer in North America today. John Cook, David Dalton, and a film crew hired by the producers documented Janis' Festival Express experience on stage and on the train. 2 bar cars filled with drunken musicians jamming. Even the dead, who rarely drank, guzzled down booze. 400 bottles were consumed, according to NRPS guitarist David Nelson, but you could get shots of vitamins and speed so you make it through your show, recalled Eric Anderson. They had like 5 doctors on board. They thought of everything. One bar car jam session captured on film shows a sloshed Janis strumming her acoustic while wedged between a wasted Rick Danto and a smiling John Marmaduke Dawson of NRPS, with whom she was having a fling. Across from Janis sat Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir, guitars in hand. With the vibe of a family reunion, the fivesome literally howled along to the old prison work song, Ain't No More Cane. When someone mentioned the train was nearing Alberta, Janis leaned into Garcia and requested the chestnut Alberta, let your hair hang low. At which Garcia smiled and murmured, "Janis, I loved you since the day I saw you." Another high point of Janis' summer was a quick trip to Austin to join the 61st birthday celebration for Kenneth Threadgill. She had cut short a Hawaiian sojourn, leaving soon after a performance in Honolulu and flying all night with John Cook to arrive on July 10th for the outdoor hoedown at the Party Barn west of town. Word had circulated that she might show up, and the pasture filled with thousands of Austinites, hoping to see the hometown girl made good. Appearing on the primitive stage midway through Threadgill's set, she gave her overjoyed mentor a souvenir from Honolulu, saying with a cackle, "Here you go, Mr. Threadgill. I wanted to give you a good Hawaiian lay." His band, including Julia Paul and her husband guitarist Chuck Joyce, backed Janis, who sat on a hay bale and played acoustic guitar on her country-tinged numbers. She introduced me and Bobby McGee as being written by a good friend of mine. He's going to be real famous. I'll give him about a year. She followed with Christopherson's melancholic Sunday Morning Comin' Down. In her intro, she acknowledged the cosmic blues that dogged her no matter what. It's just as bad every day. The next night, Janis's prospective producer Paul Rothschild attended her concert in San Diego. Seeing her live with Full Tilt for the first time, the 35-year-old Rothschild, son of an opera singer, was impressed. Her eyes were bright and clear, and her spirits were up, he recalled. Backstage, before she went on, she handed him a stopwatch and said, "Look, I've only got 35 good minutes in me. When I sing my first note, start it. Once in a while, I'll turn around and look at you, and you flash me how much I got left." Janis reminded the experienced producer of a marathon runner pacing herself. Within the first 10 seconds, I heard the voice again, the depths of understanding of the songs and how much the song relied on her rather than she relied on the song. I was enraptured because I was listening to one of the most brilliant vocalists I'd ever heard in classical, pop, or jazz music. Her ability to communicate to the audience, which evolved from what Rothschild recalled as 3,000 couch potatoes to standing up screaming like crazy for the next 40 minutes, also convinced the producer that she was a singer totally immersed in the magic of that moment of creativity. Rothschild agreed to join Janis in Larkspur to discuss working together. While sipping pina coladas she had learned to make in Hawaii, he was impressed by her intellect and willingness to stretch vocally. He directed her to sing in the church choir voice from when she was 10, according to John Cook, who sat in on the meeting. Rothschild told Janis, "What we want to do is work that part of your voice into songs and develop it into the full, passionate one, so the effect is more dramatic." "Great, let's do it," Janis said. When he asked what she wanted to be in 30 years, Janis told him, "Like the world's greatest blues singer, Bessie Smith." Rothschild promised her that she would be that and more, and he officially signed on as her producer. Though she had moved on from her folky days interpreting the work of the singular blues singer, Janis still treasured Smith's music. Just recently she had helped pay for a headstone for Bessie Smith's grave, previously unmarked since her burial on October 4th, 1937. The stone read, "The greatest blues singer in the world will never stop singing. Bessie Smith, 1895-1937. Janis was excited about the upcoming sessions. Rothschild had convinced Clive Davis to let Janis record at Hollywood's Sunset Sound, where he had cut the first two Doors albums, rather than at the CBS studio in Los Angeles. "We wanted to do this right," he told Davis, "in an environment that will be rock and roll." Like Todd Rundgren, he didn't want to work with Columbia staff engineers, and Janis liked the casual atmosphere at Sunset, a garage-like space in a seedy neighborhood. In July, Rothschild and the band did a trial session at each studio, with Sunset Sound's results, a version of Me and Bobby McGee, preferred by all involved. "All the players were good," bassist Brad Campbell observed. "You just need the right players around you for the magic, and Paul knew how to work with musicians. He could get the best out of us." Plans were made to begin recording at Sunset in September. In early August, Janis departed on what would become her last tour, which kicked off with a triumphant return to New York, performing to 15,000 at the Forest Hills Tennis Stadium. If the concert on Sunday evening was any indication, Janis Joplin finally had a backup band worthy of her, wrote Mike John in the New York Times. Full Tilt Boogie, as the name implies, has the emotion and drive needed to back Miss Joplin, and also is composed of fine musicians. It's hard to pick out individual performances in the midst of such a great evening, but John Till on guitar and Richard Bell on piano seem particularly outstanding. Full Tilt Boogie took a basically blues format and drove it with tremendous power, matching its leader's shouts, moans, and gasps with true soul. Their final New York area gig was at Port Chester's Capitol Theater on August 8th. Beforehand, she had joined Bobby Newirth and friends, actors Rip Torn and Geraldine Page at the nearby Vashon Saloon, where Janis started riffing on a Michael McClure ditty she had learned from digger Emmett Grogan. She began sing-talking the twangy number, like a sea shanty, Newirth recounted. "Oh, Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz?" while he jotted down the lyrics on bar napkins, and Tom and Page banged their beer mugs to keep time. Janis came up with the second verse, too, about a color TV, said Newirth. I suggested words here and there, and came up with the third verse, about asking the Lord to buy us a night on the town and another round. Janis and I were giggling and showing off a little bit. Mercedes-Benz made it onto the set list 2 days later at the sold-out Garden State Arts Center, where they surpassed the attendance record of 8,500, previously held by crooner Andy Williams. During the 90-minute show, Janis took audience request, with her second encore Get It While You Can, keeping the crowd in a near frenzy. Then the next afternoon, on August 11th, they played their final public performance at Harvard Stadium in Cambridge to a crowd of 40,000. An outdoor show and a hot August day were not the best conditions for a performance. Also, police patrolled the area, Janis still on the FBI surveillance list. But the concert went off without a hitch, and Janis in full tilt left their audience screaming for more. My music ain't supposed to make you want to riot, she told the Boston Phoenix. My music's supposed to make you want to... At Sunset Sound, however, Janis usually appeared happy and focused. As she and Rothschild worked on song arrangements, tempos, and instrumental parts, he listened thoughtfully to her ideas. The veteran producer was so impressed with Janis's direction and musical vision that he told her she would make a great producer, a statement she took to heart. The opportunity to independently direct a recording session became another goal. Paul was very much in love with Janis, according to engineer Bruce Botnick, who had worked with Rothschild on the Doors LPs. He told me that during the recording, right as it started, they realized there was a serious attraction. But he realized that if he started an affair, he wouldn't get an album. So he said to Janis, "Look, I really love you very much, and I'd like to be with you, but let's on tape." Occasionally after hours, they raced each other in their Porsches along the Pacific Coast Highway. Janis remained elated with her band, telling Ken Pearson, "If you guys leave, I'll kill ya." But still, she couldn't cut back on her drinking, even though she realized it adversely affected her voice. In 1969, she had to redo vocal takes during the Cosmic Blues sessions when her voice was wrecked from drinking the night before. She knew she had to prove herself with Rothschild, and if she couldn't cut it vocally, he would quit the project. So, she tried to pace herself, limiting herself to a few drinks at the studio. Afterward, at Barney's Beanery, restraint was more difficult. Then, one evening at the Landmark lobby, she spotted her dealer, George, on a call to Peggy Caserta, who, unbeknownst to Janis, was staying there too. Janis ended up at Caserta's door. They got back together, and Janis shot up heroin for the first time in some 5 months. Afterwards, she rationalized her relapse to Seth Morgan by claiming the drug would help her refrain from drinking. After no longer being so drunk all the time, she insisted, "We're laying down some good tracks." At Sunset Sound, she remained engaged with the music. Fun was the underlying thing, Rothschild remembered. It was all about smiles and laughter. One night, Janis and the band recorded an exuberant version of Happy Birthday for John Lennon's upcoming 30th on October 9th, segueing into a twisted Happy Trails, with Janis singing like Dale Evans, the song's composer, in a boisterous soprano. They had begun the session cutting material the band had road-tested all summer. Move Over, Get It While You Can, Half Moon, Cry Baby. On songs such as Me and Bobby McGee, they focused on what Janis called more of a country blues feel. "Am I getting my Texas accent back?" she asked Rothschild. "I hope so," he replied. In addition to Graham Parsons and the Burritos at the Palomino, she had discovered Linda Ronstadt belting her country rock repertoire at the Troubadour. Meanwhile, Rothschild had connected with Alabama-born songwriter and keyboardist Spooner Oldham at an Everly Brothers session and requested a song for Janis. On piano, Oldham played A Woman Left Lonely, my personal favorite Janis tune, which he had started with songwriting partner Dan Penn. Paul said, "You finish that and I'm sure I'll record it with Janis," the affable Oldham recalled. The California transplant flew to Penn's home in Tennessee to cut a demo. I took the tape to Sunset Sound and met Janis, who was sitting in the sound booth with Paul, said Oldham. She was real congenial to me, he recalled, and I hugged her and said, "You're doing great, Janis. You've got a great career going. I'm so proud of you." And she looked at me as if I'd stabbed her and said, "You know, Spooner, I think it's going to end any day." Perhaps failing to stay clean gave Janis a sense of dread. She was beginning to realize that she was not immortal. As strong as she considered herself, she had also seen friends and peers meet an early demise, some of whom were her age, 27. One of them, Jimi Hendrix, had just died in London on September 18th, choking to death on his own vomit after a barbiturate overdose. When Myra Friedman called Janis for a comment for the press, she blurted out, "There but for the grace of God." Then she pondered, "I wonder what they'll say about me after I die." 2 weeks before Hendrix's death, blues guitarist vocalist Al Wilson of Canned Heat, who had also performed at Monterey and Woodstock, died of a drug overdose. The year before that, another 27-year-old blues lover, Brian Jones, recently jettisoned from the Rolling Stones, had drowned in his swimming pool. Still, Janis remained optimistic about her music and relished the results of the sessions. "There's always a lot of growth during recording," she told Richard Bell. She phoned Clive Davis of Columbia and played him some rough mixes. "She seemed so thrilled about the record," he recalled. "She was so upbeat, so positive about a beautiful version of me and Bobby McGee." When Janis ran into Jefferson Airplane vocalist Marty Balin in L.A., she insisted he come to Sunset Sound to hear some tracks. "Janis was the best singer I'd ever heard," reflected Balin, a recording artist since his teens. "No one could match her." After the pair killed 2 bottles of booze while listening, Balin recalled she turned to him and, pleading for affirmation, asked, "Aren't I the greatest singer?" "Yes, you are," he said, and he meant it. Though she had already added a third Raga voice song, My Baby, to the album, Janis called the songwriters to see if he had anything new. Perhaps inspired by Hendrix's death, he had written, "I'm gonna rock my way to heaven," which he sang over the phone, promising to send a demo. She also enlisted Nick Gravenites, who brought a composition he'd started, cryptically titled Buried Alive in the Blues, to Sunset Sound. He taught it to the band, and he and Janis worked on lyrics. Eerily, death was in the air. Another songwriter Janis approached was 26-year-old soul singer and guitarist Bobby Womack, whose It's All Over Now was an early Rolling Stones hit in 1964. Womack arrived at Sunset Sound with his acoustic guitar to play Janis some uncut songs. "I started off with Trust Me," Womack recalled. "When I got to the end, she was out of her chair. 'I love it. That's the song.'" Womack sang a scratch vocal so that the band could work it up in the studio or on the spot. Janis quickly learned the words, and they recorded it with Womack playing along on acoustic guitar. During the session, he saw Janis's cosmic blues emerge. Jimi Hendrix had recently died, and she was in a fix about that, Womack recalled, crying and talking about death. Janis was down. She was on the phone to her boyfriend. From what I heard, she wanted him to come out and see her, unless she wired him some money. I heard her scream into the phone, "You always want money from me. That's all you want." Janis got drunk, and Womack offered her a ride to the landmark, he recalled in his 2006 memoir. While cruising in his Mercedes, she was singing, "Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz?" When inspiration struck, she had Womack turn around to go back to the studio. No one was there but Rothschild, who agreed to record Janis doing an off-the-cuff spoken intro followed by a twangy a cappella Mercedes-Benz. At one point, Janis called Michael McClure and sang it to him, then asked if he minded her cutting the song he originated. He said he liked his version better, but go ahead. Afterward, back at the landmark, Womack and Janis commiserated. He confessed he had a thing for cocaine. She preferred heroin, he remembered her saying, because it could bury her thoughts and deaden her from the world. Janis spent the next week, the last of her life, recording at Sunset Sound and making plans. The month before, she had introduced Morgan to Caserta and to heroin, and they had set up a date for a menage a trois at the landmark for that Saturday. She went to a hairdresser to get blonde streaks added to her light brown tresses. And on Friday, October 2nd, she drove her Porsche to Beverly Hills to sign her revised last will and testament in Gordon's office. He gave her the prenup for Morgan to sign that weekend. On Saturday afternoon, October 3rd, Janis scored heroin and stashed it in the bureau drawer in her hotel room alongside her works. She then met the band at Sunset Sound to listen to the recording of Buried Alive in the Blues. While there, she argued on the phone with Morgan, who had called to postpone his trip for a day. That night, Caserta would also stand her up. Planning to cut her vocal track on Sunday, Janis and keyboardist Ken Pearson ended the night with screwdrivers at Barney's Beanery. Then they returned to the Landmark, where she went to her room alone. Around 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, October 4th, she skin-popped her usual dose, injecting it under the skin of her left arm, rather than mainlining into her vein as she typically did. It is unclear why she chose to skin-pop, which delays the effects of the heroin by some 10 minutes, rather than the instantaneous high of mainlining, her preference. Afterwards, she strolled to the lobby with a $5 bill to get change for the cigarette machine. She chatted briefly with the desk clerk, who didn't realize a long-awaited letter had arrived from David Nyhouse, dated August 17th, and mailed from Istanbul. "Come on, Mama. Sure would dig that you were here. Come over and see some of the East. Nepal in October is said to be really something. Write me. If you can come for a few weeks or a few years. Really miss you. Things aren't the same alone. Love you, Mama. More than you know." Back in her room, the heroine suddenly hit as she sat on the edge of her bed, the pack of Marlboros just placed on the nightstand. Janis collapsed, her $4.50 still clutched in her hand. She hit her face on the nightstand, drawing blood, and fell to the floor, her body wedged between the bed and table. Her heart and lungs shut down, and she died. 33 years to the day of Bessie Smith's burial. Janis had no idea the heroin she injected was China White, brought into the country by a young French count whose customers included Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones. The batch Janis had scored without realizing its strength was 40 to 50% pure, rather than the usual 10% or so. Her tolerance was probably lower as well, since she had been clean for months. Unlike the time she had overdosed in the past, there was no one there to revive her. 18 hours later, at around 7:30 Sunday evening, John Cook found her body after having been alerted by Rothschild that she never arrived at the studio. In shock, Cook asked Vince Mitchell to accompany him back to Janis's room before he called Bob Gordon, who notified the police. After the authorities arrived, it didn't take long for the media to swarm in. At first, the press didn't know what to make of Janis's death because of her hard-drinking image, with not many journalists aware of her heroin use. Some believed Janis committed suicide, others theorized murder, with conspiracy theories spread due to her death coming so soon after Hendrix's. Though Cook had spotted Janis's set of works in her dresser drawer, the evidence vanished at one point. Later, an empty balloon of heroin appeared in the trash can. A friend had apparently removed it, then thought better of the idea. The subsequent police investigation, an autopsy, and a second coroner's report, supervised by Thomas Noguchi, the medical examiner who handled the deaths of Judy Garland and Marilyn Monroe, declared the cause of death an accidental overdose of heroin. On October 7th, Dorothy and Seth Joplin held a private funeral in Los Angeles without Janis's siblings, bandmates, or friends. As specified in her will, her remains were scattered by air off the coast of Marion County. On October 26th, the party she funded was held at the Lion's Share in San Anselmo, where grieving members of Big Brother and other musicians' friends performed, attended by some 200 people, including her sister, Laura. 8 days earlier, on October 18th, Janis's final album, Pearl, was completed. After her death, Rothschild and Full Tilt had returned to the studio to recut instrumental backing for several of Janis's vocal tracks. From unfinished recordings, Rothschild spliced together various vocal performances to construct final versions of songs. The instrumental track of Buried Alive in the Blues was also included. When Rothschild remembered Janis's spur-of-the-moment Mercedes-Benz, it became the 10th track, ending with her spoken, "That's it," followed by her joyous cackle. Janis's band and friends, such as Chris Christopherson, gathered to hear the finished album. "We all believe she was somehow there," Brad Campbell asserted. "We felt her there." Pearl was released 3 months after Janis's passing in January of 1971 and became the most successful album of her career, going on to sell more than 8 million copies. One of the 345s released, Bobby McGee, lodged at number 1 for 2 weeks. the second time in pop history a posthumous single topped the charts. Cry Baby and Get It While You Can also entered the Hot 100. A Woman Left Lonely had been planned for release on 45, but after Janis's death, it was determined by Columbia to be just too sad. Every time Paul Rothchild heard Janis's songs on the radio, it was excruciating. Janis's death was the most devastating thing in my life, he reflected later. We decided we'd be together forever. It was the most fun we'd ever had in the studio. She was always 110% there. Still in a deep funk month after Janis's death, he broke his contract with the Doors and declined to produce their sixth album, L.A. Woman. Jim Morrison died of a heroin overdose, allegedly supplied by the same drug dealer whose wares killed Janis, in Paris in July 1971. He, too, was 27. Albert Grossman, who had already cut back on his management duties after his relationship with Dylan ended in 1969, found his attention on his Hudson Valley recording studio and new label, Bearsville Records. Those close to him believe that Grossman, who died from a heart attack in 1986, never got over Janis's death. Seth Morgan became addicted to heroin and eventually served time in prison for armed robbery. Upon his release, he published an acclaimed novel, Homeboy, in 1990. He died days later in a motorcycle accident, where he drunkenly sped into a bridge post in New Orleans, also killing his girlfriend. David Niehaus learned about Janis's death in a back issue of Time magazine while in Kabul, Afghanistan. My entire being has been aching the past few days since hearing about Janis, he wrote in his journal. Both of us were fools to allow that last moment in each other's arms to be her last moment. Today he believes that Janis was so sensitive to the world. That's what killed her, because she had to turn it off. Niehaus continued to travel the globe, visiting more than 100 countries, and later wed a doctor, to whom he's been married for more than 40 years. In 1969, Newsweek called Janis the first female superstar of rock music. In the nearly 5 decades since her death, few artists have matched the power of her onstage performances. Her music lives on, embraced by yet another generation of fans. Her influence continues in those artists who saw her perform in the 1960s and those who have discovered her in the intervening years. One of those, Alicia Keys, told the Chicago Tribune, "I use Janis Joplin as a point of reference. I look at the total abandonment in her singing style. You feel like she's holding nothing back." Ray Charles once said that singers don't reach their full potential until the age of 50, because a whole life shows up in the voice at that age. Perhaps as she once aspired, Janis would have become like the world's greatest blues singer Bessie Smith, or even taken a turn into a whole other genre. 3 months before she died, Janis described music as the one aspect of her life that had never let her down. It had never succumbed to the Saturday night swindle. She also expressed the belief that her singing was the true expression of herself. People ask me, "How did you learn to sing the blues like that?" is how the discussion began. "I just opened my mouth and that's what I sounded like," Janis said. "You can't make up something that you don't feel." In a conversation aboard the Festival Express with singer Bonnie Bramlett in 1970, Janis acknowledged, with a new, deeper degree of self-realization, the choice she had made to become who she was, as well as the limits imposed by that choice. "You give up every constant in the world except music," she explained. "That's the only thing in the world you got." Well, that's it. I had fun reading this book, and I hope you guys had fun listening to it too. Rest in peace, Janis Joplin. All of us will take a swig of Southern comfort for you. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.